The fate of the realm changed with the birth of Camille Baratheon, the legitimate daughter of Robert and Cersei. After the tragic loss of the couple's first baby, Camille came into the world a few years later as a sign of renewal and hope for all of House Baratheon. Unlike Cersei's other children, Camille was without a doubt Robert's daughter. From birth, she had inherited hair as black as night and striking eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 storms. The court soon called her the true future queen, for although she was born a girl, her presence was strong and imposing, like the roar of a Baratheon. Cersei, however, did not see her daughter with the same tender eyes as the king. The queen, proud of her Lannister blood and golden beauty, resented Camille's appearance, for she had inherited nothing from her mother's lineage, not the blonde hair, nor the fair skin, nor the calculated smile. With fine features and golden hair like Jaime Lannister's, Camille was certainly more original. Over time, Cersei's subtle disdain grew more noticeable, especially as Camille began to capture everyone's attention with her energy, determination, and courage. Robert, for his part, adored his daughter, and that only deepened Cersei's resentment, who by then already despised Robert with all her strength. She loved her daughter, but saw Robert in her every time she got close. And because of that, she never gave herself completely to Camille as she had with her other 3 children. Camille grew up beside her father, not as a princess locked away in embroidery halls, but as a young warrior. From the age of 9, she accompanied Robert on hunts, listened to tales of the rebellion as if they were lullabies, and wielded small wooden hammers under her father's watchful eye. Robert saw in her what he had always wanted to be in his youth: free, fierce, and fearless. Even though she was a girl, Camille had the spirit he always imagined his true heir should possess, and he never failed to say so aloud, especially when wine loosened his tongue. The Red Keep began to whisper that Camille was more than the king's favorite. She was his soulmate in the form of a daughter. Cersei made no effort to hide her discomfort and frequently tried to keep the girl away from topics deemed inappropriate for ladies. But Robert would laugh and say, "That girl was born to crush skulls, not stitch flowers." Meanwhile, Camille learned the art of politics by observing the dirty games in the halls of Dragonstone and King's Landing. From a young age, she understood that surviving at court required more than bravery. It required intelligence, and that she also possessed. Over time, Camille began to interact more with her siblings, especially Myrcella and Tommen. She protected them in the hallways, played with them, and even defended them from their older brother's rudeness. It was through this bond that her contempt for Joffrey was born. Still in childhood, Camille noticed the pleasure Joffrey took in hurting the defenseless, humiliating servants, or lying to manipulate. Once, after seeing Joffrey cut a raven's wing for fun, Camille confronted him and received a slap. In response, she broke her brother's nose with a precise punch. It was the first time Cersei punished her severely. Even punished, Camille felt no regret. She said, "Cruelty should not be covered up just because it comes from a prince." The phrase was repeated among the royal guard's soldiers and even reached Robert's ears, who laughed loudly and said, "She truly is a Baratheon." Over the years, Camille developed not just strength, but charisma. The soldiers respected her, the maesters listened to her, and even some lords whispered that she would be a better queen than any pampered prince. This idea, of course, was treated as heresy by Cersei, but the seed had already been planted. At banquets, it was common to see Camille by Robert's side, attentively listening to battle stories and laughing with the king's old companions. Unlike other noble youths, she seemed interested in war strategies, the legacy of the Seven Kingdoms, and the truth behind political alliances. Once, when a Dornish ambassador joked that Camille should have been born a man, she replied, "I'd rather have been born as I am. That way I can prove a woman can do it better than them." The response caused a scandal among the ladies, but applause among the soldiers, especially those who had already drunk too much. With each passing year, Camille seemed to grow stronger, more determined. Even though Cersei tried to put her in her proper place with pompous dresses and etiquette lessons, Camille smiled, partially obeyed, and then returned to training with her wooden sword in the castle courtyards. When she turned 13, she began receiving letters from suitors of various houses, some even recommended by Tywin Lannister. But Robert rejected most of the proposals, saying his daughter would not be sold like a noble mare. The truth, however, is that Robert wanted to shape Camille as his direct successor, even if it defied tradition. He saw nothing of himself in the other 3 children, but he understood Camille from the depths of his being. The old king, tired of hunting and drinking, saw himself reflected in Camille's vibrant youth. She began to assist him with advice, visits to the halls of justice, and even in audiences with lords from the 7 kingdoms. To many, she was already a queen in fact, even without a crown. Cersei grew even more emotionally distant from her daughter, but Camille had already become a living piece on the board of power. The following night had been a blur of wine and fury. Robert staggered through the corridors of the Red Keep in search of his chambers when he heard muffled laughter coming from a nearby room. He pushed the door open, barely balanced, and was met with a scene that startled him, even in his state. Cersei, her clothes slightly disheveled, her face flushed and her hair loose, was alone with her brother Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer. The Queen's brother also looked out of place, sweaty, breathing heavily, his hair messy. When they saw Robert, they exchanged quick and uncomfortable glances. "What the hell is going on here?" Robert shouted, his voice dragged by alcohol, his eyes half closed with anger. Jaime stepped forward quickly, with a cold half-smile. "We were arguing about old childhood feuds. We don't want to trouble the king with problems of children who have grown up." Cersei nodded, but couldn't even look her husband in the eye for long. "He brought back memories. Nothing more," she said, almost whispering. Robert stood still for a few seconds, his eyes wandering between the two, and finally laughed with contempt. "Memories, of course." Without another word, Jaime asked to leave, saying he would continue his guard duty. The king looked angry, but collapsed from drink and slept on the floor the entire night. The next morning, Robert awoke with a dry throat and a heavy memory. The images from the previous night hammered in his mind like an anvil. For the first time in many years, he refused the wine at breakfast. Something was wrong. He looked across the faces of his children as they had lunch. Joffrey, proud and arrogant, with hair as golden as Cersei's. Myrcella, delicate, just like her mother. Tommen, sweet and smiling but with the same features. None of them looked like him. Only Camille, with coal dark eyes and thick black hair like Robert's. And that sparked an old memory. He thought about the baby he lost with Cersei years before. The midwife had said it was a boy with black hair. After that, Cersei gave birth to another child with black hair, and 3 children with pure Lannister features. Robert had always thought it a coincidence. Now, it seemed like betrayal. He remembered Stannis, Renly, his own parents, all Baratheons, all bearing the same family mark. "Our seed is strong," said the tale of his lineage. A seed that now seemed to have been ripped out and replaced by another. And at that moment, Robert Baratheon stopped drinking, not for health, but out of hatred. He then went to Cersei's chambers, with heavy steps and a murderous glare. "Where are the handmaids?" he asked upon entering and closing the door. 2 guards stood at the chamber doors, and the shift would change in minutes. Cersei rose from the window seat, suspicious. "I sent them away. I'm busy." Robert crossed his arms. "Just the 2 of us, then." She tried to brush it off with disdain. "Came to accuse me again? Drank too much?" But he wasn't drunk. No, sober. For the first time in years, and with my eyes open. He walked up to her. "Camille is my daughter, from the guts to the bones. But the others are not. They belong to another man. They are not of Baratheon blood. Confess it now." Cersei kept her face cold, but her eyes faltered. "You're paranoid." He stepped closer. "I'm not blind. I'm not stupid." She turned her face away. "You're a pig. You always were," Robert exploded. "And you're a whore, a viper dressed in gold." Then, in a blind impulse, he raised his hand and slapped her to the ground. Cersei screamed loudly and dragged herself away, blood on her lip and fury in her eyes. She didn't say another word. She didn't need to. Robert saw the truth in her eyes. Silence was the confession. The door burst open. Jaime Lannister entered. "Did you lay a hand on her?" he growled. Robert didn't back down. "I'm the king, and you will kneel now." Jaime lunged forward without another word. "Guards!" Robert shouted, but it was too late. Steel rang out. Jaime had drawn his sword fully and charged at the king. Robert was strong, even out of shape. He grabbed a decorative axe from the wall and defended himself at the last moment. The sound of their clash echoed through the room as the two men exchanged blows. The clash of blade against blade culminated when Jaime landed a precise strike that tore a deep wound into Robert's abdomen. The king roared in pain but remained standing. He only survived because Sir Baratheon Selmy, finally alerted by the shouting, burst through the door with sword in hand. "Stop!" The old warrior placed himself between the two. Jaime stepped back, breathing heavily. Robert dropped to his knees, the axe still in hand. Cersei was crying in a corner, blood dripping from her nose. The room fell silent. Robert was alive, but gravely wounded. Blood stained the stone floor, and his body trembled. "Fetch the Maester, now!" Barristan commanded, calling for guards to arrest Jaime immediately. The Queen's brother resisted, but ultimately obeyed. Robert, lying down, muttered incoherent things, mixing anger and pain. "She lied, deceived me, and I was a fool." Cersei did not go near him. She stood still, eyes glazed. It was as if part of her plan had been uncovered. And what would happen next, no one knew. As the Maester treated his wounds, Robert stared at the ceiling with eyes full of rage. Only Camille. Only she is mine. The pain was intense, but the hatred was even greater. Now that he knew the truth, there was only one thing he wanted to do: destroy all those who had betrayed him for years. In the final days of his life, Robert Baratheon lay in his bed, pale, his body weakened by the wound inflicted by Jaime Lannister. The Maester's skills could not stop the fever consuming his blood, and the king, who once wielded a hammer capable of crushing skulls, now spoke with a low voice, still heavy with weight. At his side were Sir Barristan Selmy and Jon Arryn, the only ones he trusted at that moment. It was to them that Robert confessed the whole truth. "Camille. She is mine. The only one. Those others are born of incest. They mocked my house." Barristan, with a grim face and shadowed eyes, was the one who revealed what he had witnessed days earlier. He described in detail the blood and the state in which he found Robert in that room. He recounted how Jaime had drawn his sword against the sovereign himself, something that, by law, was absolute treason. His testimony was unquestionable. When Jon Arryn reinforced the words of Robert and the commander of the Kingsguard, the nobles of Westeros could not ignore it. Jaime Lannister was executed in front of the Red Keep, without glory, without honor, under the weight of the shame of his betrayal. Cersei was publicly accused of adultery and incest. Even without a confession, the evidence and testimonies were enough for her condemnation. She was dragged from the throne room, amid boos and the silence of the Lannisters. Tywin Lannister, upon receiving the news, prepared his armies. But war did not come. In a strategic and silent decision, the Old Lion demanded only to keep custody of the bastard grandchildren in Casterly Rock, claiming they bore no blame for their parents' actions. The council, wishing to avoid a new civil war, agreed. Tywin, cold and calculating, withdrew. But he never forgave. Robert, shortly before dying, ordered that Camille be recognized as his legitimate heir and named Princess of Dragonstone until she came of age. At the end of that night, with the thunder fading in the sky, Robert breathed his last, saying, "Protect my daughter. She is the future of the storm." 4 years passed. Camille, at 18 years old, was crowned Queen of the Seven Kingdoms before an emotional crowd on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor. Her face was serious, marked by a youth forged in joy, discipline, and preparation. The Baratheon crown, heavy and imposing, was placed upon her head by Sir Barristan, who had sworn to protect her to the death. During her reign, Camille faced internal threats, divided houses, remnants of Lannister chaos, and even rumors of dragons in the east and the undead in the north. But she held the realm together with firmness, intelligence, and the fury of the thunder she inherited from her father. Westeros, for the first time, saw a legitimate queen who not only wore the crown, she deserved it.